Behind the polished image of the United States Navy lies a darker truth, one far more serious than peeling paint or malfunctioning radars. A new report from the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, cited by Defense News on October 8, 2025, reveals a stunning reality. The U.S. Navy has been forced to cannibalize its own ships, aircraft, and weapon systems, literally stealing parts from one unit to keep another alive. It's not an act of desperation anymore, it's a symptom of systemic decay inside the world's most powerful defense machine. This crisis, known internally as cannibalization, means taking components from one active or inactive platform to repair another. The GAO report states that this has reached alarming levels. A shortage of spare parts and supply chain delays have led to submarines, aircraft, and destroyers being partially dismantled to keep others operational. Left unchecked, this practice could quietly erode America's military readiness in the face of growing global threats. The root of the problem runs deeper than logistics. According to Defense News, the GAO identified a critical failure by the U.S. Department of Defense, or DoD, its inability to secure technical data rights from major defense contractors. Without full access to blueprints, part specifications, or manufacturing methods, Navy engineers can't produce their own spare parts. They are completely dependent on private corporations like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and General Dynamics. When those companies delay shipments or contracts stall, the only option left is to strip parts from other units. In military terms, this isn't efficiency, it's an emergency. Take a Virginia-class submarine that needs a specific hydraulic pump only available from one vendor. If delivery is delayed, technicians remove the pump from another submarine in maintenance. One vessel sails, another sinks into inactivity. At first glance, it sounds like bureaucratic incompetence, but it's really something much deeper. A superpower shackled by its own contracts. In America's procurement system, private companies hold enormous control over intellectual property and design data. The government typically gets only limited rights for operation and basic maintenance, but not full manufacturing authority. This structure, born from post-Cold War privatization, was meant to increase efficiency. Instead, it has created a monster that feeds on itself. Major programs such as the F-35, the early Burke destroyer, and the P-8A Poseidon are all bound by contracts that limit the government's ability to fix or replicate parts. In some cases, even replacing a single avionics panel requires vendor approval. In modern warfare, a delay of a few weeks can mean strategic paralysis. The impact extends far beyond the United States. NATO allies in Europe, especially the UK, France, and Germany, rely heavily on American logistical and maintenance support. If the US fleet falters, the alliance loses its backbone. Defense Blog has reported that several European defense officials have urged Washington to expand its technical data rights and strengthen domestic manufacturing capacity to prevent a readiness gap. Meanwhile, America's adversaries are quietly enjoying the spectacle. Russia, battered by sanctions and economic strain, knows that the U.S. is not as invincible as it appears. Moscow understands that a system too dependent on corporate contracts is a strategic weakness. While American ships wait for spare parts, Russian engineers focus on rebuilding local production lines. It's slower but fully under national control, a luxury the Pentagon doesn't have. China is taking notes too. Over the past 2 decades, Beijing has built a self-contained defense ecosystem. The J-20 stealth fighter, the Fujian aircraft carrier, and its hypersonic missile programs were all designed under a philosophy of technological autarky, a total independence from foreign suppliers. Chinese analyses now view the U.S. cannibalization crisis as proof that dependence on private industry can cripple even a superpower. That's not to say closed systems are perfect. Both Russia and China sacrifice efficiency and transparency for control. But in wartime, the ability to repair, modify, or replicate weapons without waiting for corporate approval is a decisive advantage. The ripple effect has even reached Latin America. Countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua have seized on the GAO report as propaganda gold. State media outlets there mock the irony. How can the world's largest military power steal parts from its own ships? In their narrative, the United States is no longer a symbol of strength, but of decline. a giant tripping over its own machinery. Even American partners in the region are quietly uneasy. If Washington loses its logistical edge, coordination across the Caribbean and South Atlantic could weaken, U.S. patrol ships might respond slower to crises, leaving a power vacuum that others, Russia or China, could easily exploit. Both nations have already expanded their military and industrial footprints in Panama, Argentina, and elsewhere. From a technical perspective, cannibalization is a legitimate stopgap. But when it becomes routine, it signals a permanent emergency. Every part stripped from one vessel means another loses capability. The cycle drains morale from engineers and sailors alike. They're no longer maintaining strength, only patching weakness. Over time, such improvisation becomes unsustainable. The GAO's report concludes bluntly that VOD's procurement system is structurally broken. Unless the Pentagon rewrites its contracts to include broader technical data rights, this cycle of dependence will continue, costing more, taking longer, and eroding readiness. On a global scale, this is a paradox of modern power. The most technologically advanced military on Earth is held hostage by paperwork. Technological sovereignty has quietly shifted from the state to corporations. If a destroyer can't sail without a company's permission, the defense isn't about warfighting anymore, it's about business. While Washington scrambles to patch its leaks, its rivals watch calmly from the sidelines. Russia laughs at what it calls capitalist defense decay. China studies it as a lesson in how to win without firing a shot, by controlling supply chains and data, not battlefields. And Europe, once shielded by American might, is beginning to realize that over-reliance on a struggling ally could one day leave it exposed. The crisis is more than a logistical failure. It's a moral warning. Power built on dependence is fragile. A fleet of advanced machines means nothing if those machines can't move. The United States now faces a defining choice: reclaim full control over its defense technology or continue down a path where every maintenance delay becomes a national vulnerability. One way or another, the world is watching. From Moscow to Beijing, from Berlin to Caracas, everyone understands the same truth. Even giants can fall if their engines stop turning. And sometimes the downfall doesn't come from the battlefield, but from the factory floor.